The cage in the cargo bay salvage ship Wayfarer drifted slowly through the wreckage of a destroyed alien battleship. Its captain, Jonas Creed, stood on the bridge, scanning the twisted metal through the dusty glass. He had seen many battlefields. But this one was different. It was too quiet, too cold. And something in his gut told him this place was hiding secrets. His crew of 4 searched the ruins with scanners and flashlights. After 2 hours, one of them, Mila, called him on. "Comes." "Captain, we found something," she said, her voice low and unsure. "It's not a weapon, not tech. It's alive." Jonas rushed to the lower cargo bay, where Mila and the others had brought the discovery. In the middle of the cold steel floor stood a tall black pod, covered in burn marks and strange alien symbols. It was locked from the outside, with energy clamps and a rusted code panel. This wasn't to protect what was inside, was a prison. He gave a nod to Mila, and she activated the override. The pod hissed and cracked open slowly, steam pouring out like smoke from a beast's mouth. Inside, curled like a wild animal, was a girl, not human, but not fully alien either. She had glowing lines on her skin, sharp fingers, and silver blue eyes that opened with a sudden jerk. The crew stepped back, hands on weapons. The girl leaped out like lightning, landing low and tense. Growling softly, she didn't speak, didn't blink, just stared at all of them like they were threats. But Jonas noticed something strange. She was shaking. "Easy," Jonas said, slowly kneeling. "We're not here to hurt you." The girl didn't understand his words, but his tone made her pause. She looked around the room, searching for exits, testing the walls with her claws. She was strong, fast, and clearly dangerous, but also terrified. They locked down the cargo bay for safety and kept her under surveillance. Jonas decided not to sedate her, not yet. He brought food, water, and even a blanket. She ignored them all, sitting in the corner like a trapped animal. 4. The next day, she didn't sleep, just watched the crew through the glass window. She attacked anyone who came too close, but she didn't try to escape. Jonas noticed her eyes followed the ship's childly no more than anyone else. Lena was only 6, daughter of the engineer, and curious beyond fear. One evening, Lena slipped into the cargo bay by mistake. The alarms didn't trigger in time. The girl stood up, staring at Lena as if she didn't know what to do. Jonas ran towards the door, heart pounding, but what happened next froze him in place. The alien girl stepped forward slowly, then dropped to her knees in front of Lena. She tilted her head, studying the child, then reached out and gently touched her hair. Lena smiled, not afraid, and said, "You're pretty." The girl blinked, then pulled away, curling back into her corner. Jonas watched the camera feed in shock. This girl wasn't just some weapon or beast. She was something else, something broken, maybe, but still alive inside. They gave her a name, Lyra. Mila didn't like it, said it was dangerous to humanize a threat. But Jonas disagreed. She needed a name, because she was no longer a prisoner of war. She was a mystery to be solved. Jonas began to spend time near her, sitting outside the glass, talking to her like she could understand. He told her stories, shared food, and showed her stars through the window. Sometimes she watched silently, other times she ignored him completely. But one night, as he stood to leave, she tapped the glass gently. He turned, surprised. She pointed to his chest. Then to herself, he placed a hand on his heart and said, "Jonas." She stayed silent, but her eyes softened, just a little. Later that night, Jonas reviewed the pod structure. It wasn't just a Khajiit, was a stasis prison, designed to hold something powerful without killing it. And the locks were not alien, they were human. His blood ran cold. Who locked her in? He whispered, and more importantly, why? He returned to the cargo bay and looked at Lyra again. She had curled into the blanket he left, watching him with wide, unblinking eyes, not wild anymore, but still far from safe. He whispered to himself, "What are you, girl?" From behind the glass, Lyra's ears twitched. Maybe she didn't understand the words, but somehow she understood the meaning. And deep inside her heart, something old and buried began to melt. Lyra didn't speak. Not with words, not with gestures, not even with sounds of pain. She only growled, watched, and moved like a ghost in a cage. But Jonas knew silence wasn't peace. It was fear wearing armor. She had now spent 5 days aboard the Wayfarer. Each day, she behaved a little differently. Some days she refused to eat, sitting in a dark corner like a statue. Other days, she paced the room like a panther, tracking every crew member's move. But what never changed, she didn't trust anyone. Jonas had upgraded the med bay for her comfort. He added soft lights, warmer air, and even a translator box. But Lyra ignored it all. She kept her eyes on the crew's specially Jonas and waited for something. No one knew what that something was, not even Lyra herself. Mila wanted her off the ship. "She's not normal," Mila said, frustrated. "She's smart, dangerous, and silent, like she's waiting to strike." Jonas didn't argue. He agreed, but something in his gut told him Lyra didn't want to hurt them. She wanted to survive. One night, Jonas entered her room with a tray of food. She was facing the wall, unmoving. He placed the tray down and stepped back, keeping his hands open. She turned slowly, sniffed the food, then looked at him with glowing eyes. She picked up a fruit and threw it at the camera above. Crack. The feed cut out. Jonas sighed. "You don't like being watched, do you?" Lyra bared her teeth slightly, not a threat, but maybe a grin. "All right," he said, shutting off the rest of the cams. In her room, "I'll respect your space." She blinked slowly, and for the first time, she took the food and ate. Jonas didn't smile, didn't speak, just sat on the other side of the glass and waited. And somehow, that silence felt like progress. The next morning, Jonas received a message from the science officer. It was a scan report on Lyra's collar, a strange, half-melted device around her neck. They had tried to remove it twice, but she had reacted violently both times. Jonas had stopped the attempts. But now he saw what it truly was. It wasn't jewelry. It was control tech, a hybrid of alien and human systems. Pain triggers, behavior codes, and something else. Memory locks. The collar wasn't just keeping her under control. It was suppressing who she was. Jonas returned to Lyra's room with the report in hand. He didn't say anything, just placed the pad on the table and slid it toward the glass. Lyra glanced at it, narrowed her eyes, then looked away. But as Jonas turned to leave, she spoke not a word, but a low sound, a whimper. He turned sharply. She was standing now, one hand touching the collar, the other trembling at her side. She looked into his eyes, then slowly traced a line on the wall using her nail. A symbol one Jonas didn't understand, but it looked like a cage. With a screaming figure inside, "She remembers," he whispered, heart pounding. "She's trapped in her own mind." Later that day, Jonas gave her a toolless stylus and writing pad. He placed it inside and stepped back. Lyra stared at it for minutes, then picked it up and began drawing, not letters, but shapes, circles, lines, jagged lightning marks, and strange faces. Jonas called the team to analyze her drawings. Most of it was unreadable. But one image stood out. A room with a large table, 6 chairs, and 3 shadows standing around a smaller figure. One of those shadows looked human. She wasn't just captured, Mila whispered. She was experimented on. Jonas nodded. Slowly, his jaw tight, and not just by aliens, he added, humans were involved. That night, the ship shook. Red lights flashed. Sirens blared, an engine glitch caused by a power spike. The crew rushed to fix the issue, but something strange happened in the chaos. Lyra escaped her room. They found her near the engine bay. Not running or hiding, she was curled in a ball, holding her head and shaking violently. Jonas approached carefully, calling her name. She didn't respond till he touched her shoulder. In an instant, she screamed a raw, painful cry that echoed through the steel halls. Her body pulsed with light, her hands slamming the ground. And then she collapsed, breathing hard, the collar flashing once. Then sparking, Jonas lifted her up gently, ignoring Mila's warnings. He carried her back to the medbay and stayed by her side all night when she opened her eyes hours later. She looked weaker, but also clearer, she whispered, voice shaky and broken. Lie. Jonas smiled, wiping sweat from his brow. You remember your name, he said softly. Lyra nodded once, then closed her eyes. For the first time since they found her, she slept, not like an animal, but like a person. And Jonas knew her fear had not vanished, but it had taken its first step toward becoming trust. Lyra woke in silence. No alarms, no voices, no glass between her and the world. Just the soft hum of the Wayfarer's med bay and the faint warmth of a blanket over her shoulders. Her body ached. Not from injury, but from remembering. Jonas sat across from her, not moving, not speaking, just watching her breathe. She looked at him, then slowly reached up and touched the half-burnt collar still around her neck. Her fingers trembled. The collar wasn't glowing anymore, but it was still there. Like a scar she couldn't tear off. She said her name. Jonas whispered to Mila later that morning, not clearly, but it was real. Mila folded her arms, her expression hard. I still don't trust her, she replied, but maybe. Now, she's becoming something more than what they made her. Jonas didn't argue. He returned to Lyra's room with a toolkit. She watched him warily as he knelt beside her and lifted a small scanner. I'm not going to hurt you, he said softly. I want to help you remove this thing. Lyra didn't speak, but she didn't resist either. She turned her head and let him scan the collar. It responded with a sudden pulse blue light, flashing across the seams, a warning, like a heartbeat trapped in metal. Jonas backed off, frowning. The tech is tied to her brainstem, he murmured. If I break the wrong line, it could erase her completely. Lyra didn't flinch. She pointed at the collar, then tapped her temple, then drew a circle on the floor. Jonas watched carefully. Trying to understand, you remember the place where they did this? He asked. She looked at him with wide, tired eyes and nodded once. Then she reached for the writing pad again and began drawing with sharp, quick strokes. This time, her lines weren't random. They formed a room, wires, machines, and a tall figure with cold, hollow eyes. Human. And smiling, Jonas stared at the image, cold creeping into his chest. She's been through more than we imagined, he said to himself. This wasn't a battlefield. He added, it was a lab. Mila joined him in the medbay hours later. She handed him an old war archive from a blacklisted Earth project, Project Vanta. Experimental human-alien hybridization using captured species. Officially shut down 10 years ago. Unofficially, who knew? One of the scientists in the archive photo looked just like the man Lyra had drawn. Same coat, same cruel smile. Jonas clenched his fists. We did this to her, he whispered. We made her into a thing, and when we failed, we locked her up and ran. That night, Jonas made a decision. He would remove the collar, no matter the risk. He entered Lyra's room with only a small toolkit and a warm look in his eyes. No sedatives, no machines, he said. Just trust. Lyra sat on the bed, eyes watching his every move when he knelt in front of her. She tilted her head forward. He reached carefully, fingers brushing the cold metal. Okay, he breathed. Here we go. The first panel came loose, easily. The second triggered a sparkly flinched, but didn't scream. Jonas kept talking. Voice calm and steady. You're not alone now, he said. Not anymore. The final wire hissed as it disconnected. Then the collar clicked and fell into his hands. Lyra gasped, her eyes glowing white-blue for a second. She collapsed into his arms, breathing hard. Hands shaking like she'd been dropped from the sky. He held her there, kneeling on the floor. She gripped his arm tightly, not to hurt him, but to anchor herself, her body convulsed, memories flooding. Through her mind like fire, images of pain, cages, needles, commands in languages she couldn't speak. And one moment her screaming while the man in the lab coat said, "She doesn't feel pain the way we do." Tears ran from her eyes, hot, glowing like liquid light. Jonas didn't let go. Later, she sat quietly in the medbay, a soft light above her. No collar on her neck. She stared at the stars through the small window. Her breathing slow and steady. Jonas placed the broken collar in a metal case and locked it away, a symbol of the past, not her future. "Do you know who you are?" he asked gently. Sitting beside her, Lyra looked at him, then touched her own chest. She whispered one word, slow but clear. "Free." Jonas smiled, tired but proud. "Yes," he said, "you are." But freedom came with danger. Somewhere in the galaxy, those who created her were still out there, still watching, and now that her collar was gone, they would feel it, and they would come. Lyra didn't know when, but she knew one thing: next time she would not run, because now she had something worth protecting, and someone who believed in her. Asterisk. For days, she was just the girl too. The crew, she was it. Her, the alien, or sometimes, the problem. But Jonas refused to speak about her like that anymore. Now that the collar was gone, she looked different, not physically but in her eyes. In the way she breathed, she was more than what they feared. She was someone, even if no one knew her name. One quiet morning, Jonas sat with her in the common bay. She sat across the table, holding a cup of warm water. She didn't drink it, but she liked the way it felt in her hands. Jonas leaned forward and asked gently, "Do you have a name?" She blinked, confused, as if the idea was strange to her. He pointed at himself. "Jonas." He said, then at her. "You." She looked away, eyes dim, and said nothing. Later that day, Jonas gathered the crew. "We need to give her a name," he said. Mila shook her head. "You don't name a storm," she replied. "But she's not a storm anymore," Jonas answered. "She's learning to be something else." The engineer, Russ, shrugged. "She's quiet, fast, smart." "What about Lyra?" "Like the star cluster," Jonas nodded. "It fits." And so she was named Lyra. That evening, Jonas walked into her room and sat on the floor beside her. He pointed to her chest and said, "Lyra." She tilted her head. Confused, he pointed again. "You, Lyra." She hesitated, then touched her own chest. "Lyra," she whispered. Jonas smiled. "That's right." And in that moment, for the first time, she smiled back, only slightly, but real. It was quick. Like a spark before a flame, but it meant everything. The next day, something strange happened. The Wayfarer systems began to glitch. Lights flickered, air flow stuttered, and doors opened without command. Jonas checked the controls. Someone had entered the ship's core code. But it wasn't sabotage from outside. It came from inside. "Lyra wouldn't do this," Jonas said. But Mila looked at him, doubtful. "Are you sure?" They searched the ship and found a hidden access panel in the maintenance bay open, recently used, and near it, a small crystal glowing with faint alien code. Jonas took it to Lyra, holding it out for her to see. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. Lyra stared at it, eyes wide, then took a sharp breath and backed away. She began shaking, whispering in her own language words no translator could catch. Then she drew a quick shape on the wall, 3 lines, joined by a circle. Jonas recognized it matched one of her earlier drawings. The lab, this crystal, had come from there. He reached out and touched her shoulder. Was someone here? He asked, from the lab. Lyra looked up at him, fear deep in her eyes. Then, slowly, she nodded. Jonas stood up, voice firm. We're not alone on this ship. Security protocols activated, cameras reviewed, and finally, they caught the figure someone in crew uniform sneaking through halls at night. But when they tried to find him, he was gone. A saboteur had boarded with the scrap from the alien wreck he had hidden in the vents. And now he had vanished. Lyra stayed close to Jonas after that. She followed him quietly, never speaking unless asked. But her eyes scanned every shadow, every hallway. Like a soldier on patrol. One night, as Jonas worked late in the command room, she sat beside him, silent for a long time. Then she said, "Safe here?" Jonas looked at her, surprised. "Yes," he said. "You're safe here." She placed her hand over her chest. "Lyra," she whispered again, as if trying to believe it, then added, "Not thing. Not weapon." Jonas nodded. "No, not a weapon. You're a person," he said softly. "You always were." Her eyes filled with tears, not fear, but something heavier, older, guilt, maybe, or grief. Jonas didn't press her. He let her sit there, watching stars blink in the black sky, and in that moment, Lyra didn't feel like a creature on a ship. She felt like a passenger, like someone on a journey. Not just through space, but through memory, through healing, through becoming, but far away. On a silent station in the shadow of a dying moon, a signal blinked to life. A screen lit up with strange alien code. A voice in a dark room said, "Subject 12 has activated emotional response. Strack her." Another voice replied, "Begin." Retrieval protocol. Lyra had a name now, but they still knew her as a number, and they were coming to take her back. It started with a pulse, barely visible. Just a flicker on the ship's long-range scanner. A cold wave of static rolled through the comms. Then vanished. The stars outside seemed normal, but Lyra didn't feel normal. She sat up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, eyes wide. Something ancient inside her had woken up. Jonas found her standing barefoot in the hallway. She was staring through the window at a tiny, glowing point in the distance. A ship too far to see with eyes. But she knew it was there. She whispered one word, her voice thin and shaking. "They found me." Jonas didn't ask who they were. He already knew. He called the crew to the bridge, pulled up the last scanner feed, and enhanced the signal. The object was stealth-cloaked, moving slow, following them like a predator. It wasn't broadcasting ID, but Lyra didn't need proof. She pointed at the screen and whispered, "Hunters." Mila cursed under her breath. "You mean the people? Who made you?" Lyra nodded once, then added, "They take back what runs." Jonas clenched his jaw. "They're not taking you, Russ." The engineer frowned at the monitor. "They've locked onto us through her collar's last signal, even though it's off." Jonas glanced at Lyra. "Then we kill the signal completely." He went to the storage room, grabbed the broken collar, and crushed it with a hydraulic press. The crystal core inside sparked and screamed a high-pitched sound like metal crying. Then silence, but it was too late. The enemy ship sped up, decloaking, revealing its jagged form. It wasn't large, but it was armed, fast, and very familiar. To Lyra, she backed away from the screen, panic rising. That ship. Pain. Cage. "Always pain," she whispered. Jonas turned to her, steady and calm. "You're not the same girl they locked away," he said. "Now you get to choose." Lyra looked up, trembling. "Choose." He nodded. "Run. Or fight." She didn't answer with words. Instead, she walked to the weapons locker and pulled out a small plasma blade. She held it like she had done it 1,000 times before, and maybe she had. Jonas called it Hunter Protocol. The crew went to battle stations, but this time, Lyra was with them, not locked away. She moved like wind through the halls, checking vents, watching screens, scanning heat signatures. Mila handed her a combat suit, slim, black, flexible. Lyra hesitated, then put it on, piece by piece. She was becoming a soldier again, but this time, by choice. The enemy ship launched a boarding pod, slammed into the cargo bay, cutting through the wall like a blade. Gas poured in, then silence. Jonas, Russ, and Mila took positions near the entry. Lyra stood near the shadows, crouched low, waiting. Her eyes glowed dimly, and her heartbeat slowed to a focused rhythm. The doors hissed open. 3 figures entered, tall, masked, silent. Their armor was matte black. Their movements too perfect to be fully human. They didn't look around. They moved straight toward Lyra's old room. Jonas whispered, "They're not here to kill. They're here to retrieve," Mila added, "like she's cargo." Lyra's lip curled, not in fear, but rage. She stepped into the light and spoke clearly. "I'm not yours." The hunters froze. One tilted its head, voice mechanical. Subject 12. Return for repair. Lyra raised her blade. "I'm not broken." Then she moved. Faster than any of them expected, she darted forward, cutting the lead hunter's leg clean through. Spinning, dodging plasma fire. The crew joined the fight. Shots ringing, alarms blaring. Lyra didn't need orders. She moved with purpose. Attacking weak points, finishing with brutal precision. 2 hunters fell. The third one tried to run back to the pod. Signaling retreat, Lyra chased him, caught him. Just before he could close the hatch, she pinned him down, face close to his mask. "What else did you put in me?" She growled. The machine hissed back. "More than you remember." Then it self-destructed. The pod exploded, shaking the bay. But Lyra was already clear, breathing hard, staring at the wreckage. She didn't smile, didn't celebrate. She just stood there, fists clenched. Because she knew this was only the beginning. Later, Jonas sat beside her in the med bay again, patching a small cut on her arm. "You didn't run," he said softly. Lyra looked at him, eyes calm. "No more cages." She replied, "Not for me. Not for anyone." Jonas nodded, proud, but deep inside, a worry grew. If this was just a retrieval squad, then who would come next? Asterisk, the Wayfarer floated in silence. The wreckage of the enemy pod drifted behind it like broken bones in space. Inside, the crew repaired the walls, patched wounds, and cleaned up the burn marks. But something had changed that couldn't be fixed with tools. Lyra had crossed a line, and now there was no going back. She stood in the mirror, staring at herself in the combat suit. The armor still smelled like smoke and metal. Her hands, though clean, still felt stained. Not from what she had done, but from what she had remembered while doing it. Jonas entered quietly, holding 2 steaming cups. He handed one to her. Unsure if she would drink it, she took it with both hands and looked down. "This is tea?" she asked softly. Jonas smiled. "Yes, earth tea. It helps calm nerves." She sniffed it, then took a tiny sip. "Bitter," she said. Then added, "But not bad." They sat together in the observation deck, watching the stars. Lyra leaned, her head against the cold glass, eyes half closed. "Why do you help me?" she asked, voice low. "You didn't make me, didn't break me. Yet. You stay." Jonas took a long breath, because someone should have helped you a long time ago. Lyra was quiet for a moment, then said, "When I was in the lab, they told me I was a tool, not a person. They showed me pain, measured my limits, erased my screams." Jonas looked at her gently. "They were wrong." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small picture. It was a photo she had found on the ship, a picture of Jonas's crew. Smiling around a dinner table, she stared at it every day now, like it was a puzzle she couldn't solve. She pointed at the image and asked, "This is family?" Jonas nodded slowly. Yeah, not by blood, but by choice. Lyra looked confused. Family chooses. Not always, Jonas said, but the best ones do. Lyra studied the photo again, her fingers tracing the outlines of faces. Then she looked up. Do I belong here? Jonas didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned to her and asked, Do you want to belong here? Lyra blinked, surprised by the question. She whispered, Yes, then you do. Jonas said with a warm smile. It's not about where you're from, Lyra, he added. It's about what you choose to be. Over the next few days, things changed. Lyra began helping in small ways, carrying supplies, organizing tools, even offering to assist in repairs. Her movements were still quiet, careful, but now filled with intention. When Lena, the child, ran up to her and hugged her leg, Lyra froze again, but this time she didn't pull away. She knelt down, touched Lena's hair, and whispered, Safe. Russ began teaching her how to read basic human code. Milla, though, still cautious, invited her to join a meal. Lyra sat at the edge of the table, watching how humans laughed, argued, ate, and teased, and slowly she began to smile with them. Not always, not fully, but something was growing. That night, she asked Jonas, What does human mean? He thought for a while, then replied, It means making mistakes. It means feeling pain. And love. It means choosing your own path, even if it scares you. Lyra nodded, thoughtful. Then I want to be human, she said, her voice firm, even if I wasn't born one. Jonas placed a hand on her shoulder. You're already more human than most, but peace doesn't last forever in the stars. That evening, a message arrived, encrypted, high priority, silent. Jonas read it alone in the control room, his eyes narrowing. Then he locked the door and activated the secure channel. Repeat that, he said sharply. The voice on the other end replied, Lyra's DNA signature has been traced to a failed Earth project known as Vanta X. She is considered unstable, valuable, and above all, recoverable by any means. Jonas ended the call, heart heavy. He walked back toward the living quarters, where Lyra sat teaching Lena how to draw stars. She laughed, a real sound now, soft and unsure. But honest. He watched from the hallway. A shadow in the light, she was learning what it meant to live, to trust, to feel. But he also knew someone out there still saw her as a subject, and they wouldn't stop just because she smiled. They were coming, not to save her, but to claim her, and when they arrived, Lyra would have to show them what being human truly meant. The stars were calm, but Wayfarer was not. Jonas stood in the command room, staring at the incoming signal. 3 ships, silent, fast, and headed straight for them. No hails, no warnings, just purpose. Cold and calculated. They had found Lyra. Again, and this time, they weren't sending scouts. They were sending everything in the engine bay. Lyra stood before a mirror, her suit zipped tight, her hair tied back. Her face was calm, but her hands trembled slightly, not with fear, but with decision. She had been made to obey, then trained to kill, but now she was choosing to protect. Jonas entered quietly, holding a data chip. This is your chance, he said. If we send this to the relay station now, they'll pick you up, take you far away to a place they can't find you. Lyra took the chip, stared at it, then closed her hand around it. Her voice was low, but clear. No, she said. No more running. Mila paced behind her, checking the shields and systems. You don't have to prove anything, Mila said. You've already earned your place here. Lyra turned slowly, eyes glowing like soft lightning. They think I'm still their weapon, she said. They don't understand. Steel can melt. As the enemy ships approached, Wayfarer prepared for its final stand. The crew took positions, engines powered down to go dark. They would strike only when needed, fast, precise, together. But Lyra Lyra walked alone to the cargo bay. There, she placed the crushed remains of her old collar on the floor. She stared at it for a moment, then whispered, "I was born inside a cage. I broke it, now I burn it." Above them, the enemy. Ships locked weapons. Then one voice came through sharp, synthetic, emotionless. Subject 12. Surrender for decommission. Lyra stepped forward to the comms and replied, "My name is Lyra. You do not own me. You never did. The enemy fired first." But Lyra was already moving. She launched from the cargo bay in a drop pod, no weapons. Just raw tech and a single mission: reach their main ship, shut them down from the inside. She had done it before as a tool. Now she would do it as herself. The Wayfarer drew fire, taking damage, shields flickering. Jonas shouted commands. Mila rerouted power. Russ fought to keep the engines alive. But they all knew this fight wasn't about the ship. It was about her. Lyra landed hard in the enemy vessel, tearing through the hull with heat and speed. Alarms screamed, but she moved with perfect focus. Through steel halls, past guards and machines that once trained her. Memories flashed: pain, wires, cold hands, silent rooms. But she kept walking. At the core, she found the control node. There, standing tall, was him, the man from her memories, aged but unchanged. He smiled when he saw her. "You came back," he said. "You were always special, Lyra." She tilted her head. "You called me Subject 12. I call myself now," she said, stepping forward, "and I choose to end this." He raised a remote one last control system. He pressed it, and Lyra froze, body trembling, lights flickering through her skin. But she didn't fall. She screamed, forcing herself forward. "Not yours anymore," she growled. She ripped the controller from his hand, crushed it, and sent a surge through the node. The entire enemy system collapsed. Ships powered down, weapons went dark, engines cut. The signal that once controlled her destroyed at its source. She stood in silence, the man unconscious at her feet, steel melting into nothing. Back on the Wayfarer, lights stopped flashing. Enemy threats vanished from the radar. Then a soft pink Lyra's pod returning, damaged, smoking, but alive. Jonas ran to the bay as it opened. Lyra stepped out slowly, her suit torn, her face covered in dust and sweat, but her eyes calm. Lena ran to her and hugged her tightly. Lyra knelt down and hugged her back without hesitation. "You did it," Jonas whispered. Lyra nodded. "I'm not afraid of who I was," she said. "I'm proud of who I chose to be later." As the crew sat around the dinner table, Lyra joined them without invitation. She didn't sit at the edge this time. She sat beside Jonas. Beside family, she laughed once, awkwardly. But they all smiled. Jonas lifted a glass and said, "To Lyra." Mila added, "To freedom." Russ raised his cup. "And to burning every cage they tried to build." Lyra looked around the table. For the first time in her life, she felt full, not of data, not of commands, but of belonging. And when she looked at her reflection in the metal wall, she didn't see a subject. She saw a person. A girl, not of steel, but of choice, of scars, and of strength that no one could ever own again.